by BMC Software. Our featured speakers today are Jay Lipovich and Tom Vogel. Jay is Principal Product Manager for Mainframe Solutions Optimization at BMC. Jay has responsibility for systems management and MLC cost management solutions at BMC. Tom Vogel is the lead solutions marketing manager for Mainframe cost optimization solutions. Over 25 years, Tom has enjoyed various technical, marketing, and business development roles in the enterprise software industry. At IBM Corporation for over 18 years, Tom managed product launches for successful mainframe database solutions. Today, Jay and Tom will share with you a structured yet flexible model you can apply to significantly reduce your mainframe costs. With our introductions complete, Jay, I will turn the presentation over to you.
Thank you, Janine, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are and joining us. We welcome you and we appreciate your attendance. What we'd like to do is share with you some learning that we have gained by way of survey information and by way of working directly with customers who are trying to make the mainframe platform more cost-effective and more powerful in their organizations. To begin with, we'll share some results from our recently completed mainframe survey. This is the 10th year that BMC's conducted this survey. We had over 1,200 respondents sharing their opinions about what's important and what the future of the mainframe looks like. One of the questions we ask is about top priorities. And for 5 years in a row, cost optimization and cost reduction remains the number one noted priority for those working with the mainframe. Application availability, though, is number two, and the gap between those two continues to shrink. So we see not only the focus on cost, but the need for increased availability, which, according to other data in the survey that we won't cover today, is being driven a lot by digital engagement, mobile analytics, the things that the new Z13 is particularly adept at handling. So as we look at where the priorities are and what the concerns are, we also asked a question to deal specifically into costs. Now we know from industry data, from analyst data, and from our own survey data that mainframe software is nearly half of the cost for most budgets. And again, you recognize that this is like an EPA statement. Your mileage will vary. Various organizations will have more or less cost associated with their mainframe budget. But on average, about half of it is software. So then we asked in the survey, how much of that software spend is being spent for the MLC software? And of course, MLC software is the software we need to run our mainframes. It's ZOS and KIX and DB2 and IMS and MQ and all of the core system and middleware software on which we run critical applications for the business. And as you can see from these results, nearly half of the respondents are spending between 25 and 50% of their software budget on this MLC software. And 22% are spending 50% or more on MLC software. And so this focus on cost reduction and a recognition that MLC software is a costly item in the budget leads us to the opportunity for a structured program for reducing those costs.
So I'll take over from here. Thank you, Jay. You know, your overall mainframe budget might look similar to this pie chart at your company. We know that MLC costs are in the neighborhood of 30% or even more of your overall mainframe budget. You probably have managed other items in this pie chart really well, but people we talk to are really unsure of how to significantly lower their MLC costs. And, you know, in cases of smaller to medium-sized mainframe shops, this 30% number can be even higher. We hear, 40 to 50% sometimes. On top of that, MLC software costs rise in the neighborhood of 4 to 7% annually. So we'd like to start off here with a polling question, it's about your confidence in your organization's ability to optimize or reduce MLC costs. So go ahead and participate in this polling question, please. And I'll just take you through the answers here. Basically, we've taken no action because we don't have time or knowledge about how to do it, or we're just beginning to research MLC cost management, or we've been planning specific actions, or we've moved along and we've taken some action, but we'd like to do more. Or have you taken some action and reduced some costs somewhat, or hey, do you have MLC totally under control? If you do, maybe, I don't know, why are you on the call, right? So, one thing we do know while you're finishing up this poll is that people who do not take action at all tend to pay on average 15% more for MLC. And those who do take action tend to pay less, up to 15% less. So that's a 30% swing. And it looks like our results are in, so terrific. Thank you so much for participating. And it looks like we have a tie between A and C, which is, I'm going to show you on the next slide that this is a maturity model for, it might help you understand where you are in the continuum of taking action. So, speaking with our BMC customers and industry experts, we know that mainframe organizations that are taking these actions are saving quite a bit. And when you do the math on the typical monthly MLC bill, it can mean tens of thousands each month. So it looks like our poll is just about done, and here are the results. It looks like we've got E, which is we've taken action to reduce costs somewhat. So that was the winner. That's good. That's good. It sounds like people are taking different actions, saving, driving those costs down. That's good. Second, at 26%, we've taken some action, but would like to do more. And that's really what we hear most of the time. And so, BMC has been maniacally focused on providing solutions to help. So let me take you through a little bit of the maturity model. So cost driver awareness involves basically, maybe using spreadsheets to analyze your SDRT report or taking other actions to identify your peak. I'm sure a lot of you are already doing this. This can be labor intensive, and it can yield some savings. And you're probably doing a lot of this today. Same for tuning and managing peak workloads through application monitoring and tuning. It's another step that you've probably already taken and doing on a daily basis. Your monitoring solution can help you identify problems and issues, and tuning is a common way to increase efficiencies to lower costs. And then we get into soft capping. So when we talk to customers, many of them have been either burned by capping too aggressively, or they don't get much out of it because they really need to be careful not to impact their critical workloads. And so it's really kind of a difficult balancing act. And so many customers we talk to, don't take full advantage of maximum capping capability. Plus, it can be really manual. And this is kind of where automated intelligent capping can help. And then the fourth bar to the right is my favorite technique, which is optimizing subsystem license costs through separating or isolating subsystems across logical partitions, or LPARs. When you make an effort to do this and optimize where you're running workloads, the MLC math tends to change, and sometimes quite significantly. So we'll talk about this more later in the webinar. But then finally, one of the most significant things companies are doing after reducing their MLC costs by a significant amount comes at contract renewal time. And so with the lowest possible, level of MLC costs in place, they're in a more positive position to negotiate, positive, contract terms. And so, the question is, with these options to save on MLC, how do you take advantage of all these opportunities? So BMC has, and its partners, SCS Consulting and CompuWare and CPT Global, we've been helping companies address the MLC cost issue for some time now, and we're really trying to provide our customers with key automation and control that wasn't available just 2 to 3 years ago. So these solutions provide flexibility in that you can choose from multiple techniques that will help you reduce MLC costs. And by using a combination of these techniques, it's possible to take, go at your own pace and take a structured approach and significantly lower these costs. So where do we start? For those of you who have not really begun to take much action yet, you might be asking, we could do any of these things. Where do we start? Well, it's like a ship navigating on waters at night, right? You need to understand a few things first before you can go very far. You need to know where you are. Next, you need to know where you're headed. And finally, you need to plan a course and track that course of action, right? So with MLC, it's similar. The first action you want to take, and many of you, like we've seen, have probably done this already, is to analyze your SCRT reports and understand what's driving your peak. And really what you need here is a transparent reporting facility that enables you to visually see in a dashboard all of your subsystems and workloads that contribute to the peak and when. And then taking it a step further, you should be able to factor in your annual MLC budget and track to it so that you know if you're going over or under, at the end of the year. In the case of a true-up that you might be paying each year on negotiated MLC rates, this can be critical for planning ahead for budget overruns. And in the case of batch applications, you really need a way to optimize, when to run them. And if you can identify the impact or contribution to peak, then you can move them to the appropriate time off peak. And so with that, I'll hand it over back to Jay to discuss more about understanding what drives your peak. Jay?
Thank you, Tom. So as Tom said, we want to take this in a structured approach, and we'll begin with budget reporting. Now, this is reporting that's useful to you. Executives find this reporting very useful as well. What's showing here, the upper left-hand quadrant, is a simple red-green bar indication of the current status of the MLC budget on the left side, which is slightly under budget, and the projected status of the budget at the end of the contract term, which for this one is the end of 2015, which is projecting an overage of about $400,000. And then on the bottom right-hand side are the month-by-month views of over or under budget status. So the obvious question that's going to be asked is, if we're running over budget, what's causing it? And so what we'll do now is drill down, and we'll look at these reports fairly quickly. We'll have time to go into detail on individual reports, but we'll look fairly quickly at a way to understand what might be causing the cost increases, and then we'll look at how we take action to reduce the costs. So as we drill down, we may want to look at the total length of the contract. As I said, the previous one was ending in 2015, or align it with your MLC contract and this one, which is ending 3 years from now. The first question is, which licensed products do we have that are driving costs? This is one way to view that. What you see are the licensed products listed on the left. The CACs or CPCs that they're running on, they're called Briles and Pecos here, and the cost contribution to the monthly license cost of each of those and on each of the separate CPCs. And here you can see the ZOS, IMS, and DB210. And as we scroll down, we would be able to see all of the products that are contributing to those costs. The next level down is to say which LPARs are helping to drive that. Because one of the key understandings with MLC pricing is that much of the cost is related to a specific product and the LPAR it runs on and the peak of the activity on that LPAR. So getting an understanding of which LPARs, and here you can see that there are several LPARs called out here. And near the beginning of the month, the little red dot at the top is the peak 4-hour rolling average that determines the costs. So this is for the particular CPC that we were looking at, and here are various LPARs. Seeing the LPAR activity begins to give us an understanding, but begs the next question, and that is what work is driving that LPAR activity. So here we've selected for a specific LPAR. We want to start to drill down on the workloads that are running. And in this case, you can see that we've selected to go onto the graph the system work, which has to be there, the batch, and the DB2. So one of the things that shows up fairly obviously in a graphic like this is that, again, looking at the peak 4-hour period, which is the red dot near the beginning of the month, nearly half of the activity is being driven by batch. That's the orange. And we would then begin to wonder, do we need to be running that batch at that time, or could it be run at a different time, and would that allow us to reduce the MSU consumption that's driving our peak? And that leads us to the next level of drill down, which would be, let's understand specific batch jobs or started tasks that are running during time periods. So here we've now drilled down, again, looking at the peak for the month. You can see that little red X near the beginning of the month. We're looking at the 4-hour rolling average peak. And by looking at that, we're saying, okay, which jobs are contributing to the peak? And one of them, the one on the top there, stands out. It's the 36 MSUs that it's consuming during peak. And so the question that would immediately come to mind is, does that have to run then? And if we ran it at some other time, what would happen to our cost? And so that's the structured approach to start to understand what's running and what's driving the peak. Now, one of our customers, there's a customer success story that was written up. An analyst firm did an analysis of it, and this is Swiss Re. They're a reinsurance company in Switzerland, obviously. They began viewing their activity in the way that I just showed you. And they actually had been doing MLC cost management. And they would have checked the box that we've got MLC cost management under control. They had a really good program. They'd reduced cost. But when they began viewing the results, as I just showed you, they were able to spot batch work that they thought should not be impacting peak, but it completed, as it completed, it was during the first hour of the rolling 4-hour peak period. So, in fact, it was contributing to peak. They scheduled it to run an hour earlier and pulled their costs down by $100,000 a year. Now, over time, as reported by the success story analyst report, they projected to save $2.7 million, getting an ROI of nearly 600% with an 11-month payback on using this kind of approach. So that's the starting point. And maybe that's the easy part. What we hear from a lot of people is, okay, I can figure that out, but sometimes it's hard to know what actions will save me money. And sometimes it's hard to convince all of the stakeholders involved that we ought to take action. So the next step and the next level of maturity, if you will, is not only to understand the drivers, but to understand how to model what those changes might mean in terms of cost impact. So again, I'll show you some fairly quick examples of the types of things customers have run into that present the opportunity to save money. This first one, if you ask a shop, are they running DB2 utilities during peak? Most people will say, well, no, we don't. What we have seen, looking at literally hundreds of sets of data from mainframe sites, is that a surprising number have utilities that are running during peak. In some cases, they may need to. If they don't need to, then rescheduling those and pulling them out of the peak is going to reduce cost. If they have to run at that time, you've got online reorgs that just have to be happening, then the focus would be on picking the most CPU efficient utility so that whatever footprint you have is minimized. The second type of activity, and the one that Tom referred to, and he'll actually talk a great deal more about in just a couple of minutes, is when you have a subsystem running on an LPAR using very little MSUs. So in this case, the DB2 and the DB2 utilities are only using about 55 MSUs, but they can be charged at the peak MSU usage for the whole LPAR. And so the question is, what if we could run that work on another LPAR where DB2 existed and remove that DB2 work from the LPAR and from the cost? So modeling that is a fairly straightforward process. In this case, it can be done in one of two ways. One is by modeling a whole workload moving. The other is by looking at the started tasks or jobs associated with the work. So you see a number of those started tasks or jobs on the left-hand side. And in the bottom right-hand panel, we've simply said, let's move this to another LPAR, to the DB2A LPAR, on the same CPC. And in making that move, what we want to recognize is we're going to remove the license, the running of DB2 on that LPAR. We won't have any DB2 work running there anymore, and that would allow us to reduce costs. Modeling that allows us to see what the cost impact would be. So some costs could go up if we added activity that would impact the peak on the other LPAR. There could be an increase there. And some costs go down because we're removing licenses. The net in this case is a savings of almost $250,000 a year in MLC costs. And it's having data like this. Mainframe sites have said, when I go into a meeting, and in some cases, we've had customers say, we've kind of thought that moving that would be a good thing to do, but we can't convince everybody. When they walked into a meeting with a report like this and said, do we want to save $250,000, it's easier to get agreement and consensus that that's the right action. The other activity, and probably the easiest, is to identify batch work that doesn't need to run during peak. So in this case, there were 7 batch jobs. So we're only looking at 7 jobs. And we said, circled in red on the right-hand side, we simply said, let's run those 8 hours earlier. And the graph on the top shows they were running during peak and the MSUs they were consuming. The graph on the bottom shows they're going to be running 8 hours earlier. And again, we asked the question of what's the cost impact? And the cost change is $36,000 a year in savings with just 7 jobs running at a different time. So there's a great deal of opportunity for saving money. Some of it will take more work, but a lot of it can be fairly simple. One of those is capping. Now, capping is a challenge we hear from a lot of sites. There are some risks associated with it, and so many sites are a little reluctant. One of the things that can help with an understanding of where capping might be effective is this view. This is looking at the peak activity based on workload importance. So the dark blue is importance 5. This is the least important work on the system. Over half of the peak is being driven by importance 5 work. And so this indicates an opportunity where perhaps caps could be put in place. Those caps would constrain the importance 5 work, which would be okay. and potentially reduce costs. Now, as I said, we hear from customers that there are concerns about using capping, and we saw the opportunity to help out by providing a different approach to that. And let me turn it back to Tom to allow Tom to share with you how that's done. After I should mention the results that one of our customers had. It's a combination of reporting on what's happening and understanding how changes can reduce cost and using capping. So this is a transportation company. They were experiencing MIPS growth of 8 to 10% a year. And by using the analysis of cost drivers and capping, they were able to roll back their MLC costs to the level they had been at early 2013. So reducing costs by about 20% and seeing an ROI on their efforts in about 6 months. And so to explain more about exactly how they use capping to do that, we'll let Tom take you through an understanding of the capping and the subsystem optimization.
All right, thank you, Jay. I'd like to talk about, are you exploiting workload capping today, right? Because some teams are using capping to limit their MLC costs today, but many sites are still incurring higher costs because they lack confidence in their ability to set effective caps without impacting their critical workload. And so I'm going to talk about BMC intelligent capping for a little bit, and also called ICAP, which enables you to run your own policy-driven automated capping that monitors your workload activity and dynamically adjusts your caps to ensure your most critical workloads are not delayed, right? On top of this, our latest version of ICAP has patent-pending technology that makes it cost-aware, meaning that it makes recommendations based on impact to your MLC costs. And so this comes in really handy when you're balancing capacity limits across systems, which ICAP does automatically. So to make sure you have total control over any automation, right, which is important, ICAP offers 3 modes of operation: observe, message, and manage. Observe mode watches the activity and collects the information. And you can even use this mode to help you define a policy, which, in this mode, you're not required to run a policy, but you can if you want to. Message mode then observes the activity, collects the information, and logs the actions that it would have taken based on the policy, but it takes no action at that point. And then you can put it into manage mode, which observes and assesses the activity based on the policy, based on your policy, and collects the information, and then takes the required action and logs all actions that are taken. And this is really important, right? Activity logging tracks all actions that have been taken so you can stay in control and know everything that happened. So let's take an example scenario so that you can see just how effective this can be. This is an example workload for 3 LPARs with and without ICAP. So in this top portion, without ICAP, it's kind of a sad picture. There's no cost optimization and there's high risk, right? So you can see that on LPAR 1, we're manually capping an importance 1 workload, important workload, right? Critical workload. And we're capping it way too low. And in LPARs 2 and 3, we're capping lower priority workloads too high. So this situation might be tough to fix in a manual, static way, but with ICAP being workload aware and understanding the importance, we see that in the lower half now, importance 1 workload is not capped, and it doesn't waste capacity either. So the increase in this capping is balanced with the excess capacity from lower priority work in LPARs 2 and 3, which are now capped in an efficient way. So hopefully this is clear to you. What's happening here is you're basically saving about 160 MSUs from your peak in this scenario. And if you use an example, say your cost might be $350 per MSU, that's over $50K per month in savings. And very importantly, no capping of high importance workload is taking place. So the overall MSU usage is lowered by dynamically sharing the capacity across all PARs and groups. So now let's take a look at some successful customer scenarios. So we have a large international bank who has implemented cost analyzer and intelligent capping. And a couple of years ago, it set its sights on digital banking, and senior leaders had established a group to drive digital transformation. So with mainframe software costs rising, the staff needed to drive down monthly license charges to free up money for digital services to ensure that their customers had exceptional digital experiences, which could increase their market share, strengthen their competitive position, et cetera. So with actionable data from cost analyzer and intelligent capping, IT identified workloads that drove the peak 4-hour rolling average. It focused initially on MIPS consumed by batch processing, which was the primary driver of the peak consumption at the time. And the staff was able to slash MSUs by 17%, which translated to a savings of thousands of euros each month. And this is just fascinating. The customer said, we saw savings from the very first minute with intelligent capping. This was coming from the mainframe management team. And they said, we've already reduced MSUs by 17%, and we're exploring additional areas where we believe we can bring costs down even more. So here's the kicker. With peak usage now driven by online processing, right, and with the number of online transactions for mobile devices rising, the bank is now positioned to take advantage of IBM's MLC discounts on mobile transactions. So it's just a great story. We're very happy for them. So I want to tell you another story here about a growing U.S. insurance company. They're a smaller mainframe environment, and their peak was driven by their Saturday batch workloads. 2 LPARs would spike, right? They pay monthly on ZOS, and for the rest of their software, IMS, DB2, KIX, MQ, they pay on an agreed monthly amount based on a contract agreement. So they budget for a yearly true-up, it was about $50,000. Well, after 2 years of searching for the right technology, the company chose to purchase BMC Cost Analyzer and BMC Intelligent Capping. Their goal was to lower their MSUs to a peak of around 75 MSUs to lower their MLC costs. Intelligent Capping enabled them to do that right away. So they used all 3 of the modes, observe, message, and manage, and within 2 weeks of installing, they moved to manage mode on all their LPARs on the KEC, and their critical work was running at a lower monthly cost. So their efforts to save on MLC have been extremely impactful. Their peak MSUs came down 7%, and then they say they're saving, overall about 9% on their MLC in just 6 months of using these products. So they also estimate, very, very critical point here, that their true-up has been reduced to $0. That's $0. So that's another great story. And they actually tell us that it's just begun, right? As they increase their capping efforts and get more aggressive, they're likely to take the MSU cap peak to, down to 74 and 73, even lower. So they'll get that base down even further. Okay, and then a third story I want to tell you about is there were 2 mid-sized American energy companies that combined and merged into a larger American energy company. Together, they were paying about $1.8 million a year annually in MLC. They already owned other BMC solutions, so they decided to take a look at Cost Analyzer and Intelligent Capping. And the manager of the mainframe and his executive drove the decision to go ahead and bring those in. And BMC worked with them on a business case that showed that they were going to save $212,000 just in the first year, and an overall MLC savings of 11%. So here's the fascinating point. they're actually seeing more than that today. They purchased back in March, they were running them in June, and they saw immediately about $20,000 a month in savings. So again, they're expecting, a high ROI. Again, it's a great story. It's almost a no-brainer. And in fact, I should tell you that, we had a tier 1 analyst recently told us, he kind of an off-the-cuff remark. He said, any mainframe customer should do this. It just makes sense. So let me move on at this point. How am I doing on time? Time check here. Okay. Now I want to kind of switch gears and talk about a topic that can have a really large impact on MLC costs, optimizing subsystem placement. So by enabling the most expensive MLC products like KICS, IMS, and DB2 to talk to each other without running on the same LPAR, your MLC costs can drop. And we're seeing some significant drops, right? Customers are telling us about some really fascinating numbers. I probably don't need to educate you on this, but just in case, I'll just mention it really quickly. So want to make you aware that there's a technical restriction that exists for MLC software that when it runs, that runs on the same LPAR. So when a transaction request comes in, say for DB2 via KICS, both these subsystems must reside on the same logical partition. And so that can cause, a configuration that is very expensive from an MLC standpoint. BMC last year launched a new product called Subsystem Optimizer. You may have heard of it. It's a new solution that can help with this issue and significantly drive down MLC costs by providing flexibility that you might not have today. And basically, you can place subsystems on separate LPARs and still communicate with each other. The amazing part is that this separation often changes the MLC math quite significantly, and all without any application changes, right? So configurations that are supported by Subsystem Optimizer include KICS to DB2, KICS to IMS DB, and IMS TM to DB2. So in addition, I just want to mention a quick important benefit to Subsystem Optimizer as well. It provides an important failover capability in case the subsystem temporarily goes down. For instance, if a request comes in and the DB2 or IMS subsystem are down, you normally need to wait for that subsystem to be restarted and for the transaction to complete. With Subsystem Optimizer, you can redirect that request immediately to another running subsystem on a different LPAR. So that's a big advantage that you might not have today. So, what you want to do is begin by grabbing the low-hanging fruit. So using Cost Analyzer, you can quickly see where MLC adds up. And you might be able to save a lot of money on MLC by optimizing subsystem placement in a development or test environment. So take a look at that. The other thing is, when you use Subsystem Optimizer, you can model the MLC impact right away with Cost Analyzer. So you can see how customers today are using these two very closely together because using Cost Analyzer, you can immediately see the effects of or even model the changes before you spend the time to take any action, right? Okay, so let me quickly talk about how Subsystem Optimizer works. What we're doing is we're merely passing along the request. So KICS, DB2, and IMS don't even know that Subsystem Optimizer exists, right? So no application changes are needed. But now you've got this ability to isolate and separate subsystems, and the effect is quite significant, and we'll take you through a quick savings example here. The MLC math for, and most of you are probably familiar with this, it's very complex. And here's a great example of how to show you the power of how Subsystem Optimizer can work. On the top, you see that KICS runs at a peak of 200, DB2 of 400, and other software called ZOS at 150. Now, you're billed at 750 MSUs for each LPAR. Not really too good if you're not fully utilizing a particular subsystem, right? The cumulated peak is 1,500 and is the basis for charging MLC on all the software. So Kix, DB2, and other software are all charged at 1,500. Now, if you move the subsystems to be isolated, as in the lower part of the diagram, you're lowering your MLC because the math changes quite significantly. So now Kix is only billed at 575 and DB2 is billed at 975. The other software is now 1550. We bump it up a little bit here to account for subsystem optimizer running. But you can see that fairly easily this is a mathematical no-brainer, right? Kix drops from $105,000 to $40,000. DB2 from 112K to 73K. And then the other software is bumped up slightly to 108K. So you've basically saved 62% on Kix, 35% on DB2 for an annual savings of $1.2 million. So this is pretty amazing. And I would imagine, Jay, that you agree that this is pretty amazing, right? Okay.
I do agree it's amazing.
Okay. All right. So let me take you through a quick success story with a customer of ours using Subsystem Optimizer. I would be remiss if I didn't include a customer example here because we're hearing some fantastic stories out there. This is the government agency who runs about 500 MIPS, so not a large mainframe shop, but still spends a significant amount each year on MLC. They purchased and they're running Cost Analyzer and Subsystem Optimizer. They quickly got information from Cost Analyzer that said there were potential big savings available in their test and dev department, test and development environments, as well as their production environment. Using Subsystem Optimizer now is saving them about 4% in their test and dev environment. And interestingly, they're looking at 11 to 14% savings in peak workload in their production Kix environment, yielding an estimated 870K savings over 5 years. So, there's big savings to be had out there, and I just want to show this very quickly. This is the customer slide. It's a customer proof point, and it basically says, what you're using does not equal what you pay, right? So they use less than 1 MSU for Kix at the peak of the CPC, and yet they paid for 24 MSUs. So, these numbers are small, but just wanted to let you know that this is what's going on, and this needed to be fixed, right? So a very big difference, very big difference. So that concludes the overview of Subsystem Optimizer, and that brings us to our second polling question, which you may have seen earlier in this webinar, but I'd like you to answer it again now that you've heard the whole story. Go ahead and let us know, which actions are you ready to take, or at least start looking at to reduce your MLC? Is it the budget planning and tracking? Is it transparent reporting and cost driver awareness? Is it the capping? Or do you want to take a quick look at low-hanging fruit in the subsystem optimization? Or, a valid answer is you're not sure. So we'll give that a couple more seconds to complete. Appreciate your participation in this. Okay. Go ahead and close the poll when you're ready, Sean. Thank you very much. Okay, so the majority of you said you're not too sure where to start, and that's very valid. Reach out to BMC anytime. We're willing to help. We can talk this through to let you know, based on your environment, based on your requirements and your business, what makes the most sense. But equally, it looks like you're all also ready to do more work around cost driver awareness, do some work around workload capping, and look at subsystem optimization. So that's great. Thank you for participating in that. So I just want to wrap up the summary here, going back to our maturity model, and stress that, there are significant advantages to taking action on optimizing the economics of your mainframe, right? As I said before, you can do nothing, but if you do, you're going to end up paying much more than the average. And any one of these actions can yield really good results. And as you move from left to right on this maturity model, the savings can add up very quickly. And really what I like about this approach and this structured approach is that it provides you with a flexibility of options. So you can take actions based on what your shop is comfortable with, what your IT staff is comfortable with. And so go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, and I was going to mention in that regard, you mentioned what the staff is comfortable with. Tuning applications has been an effort that people have done for years. The challenge has always been twofold. One, how do I figure out which applications are actually impacting peak? And then, how do we make a business case for spending the development time and effort to actually do the tuning? So one of the efforts that we engaged in early this year was a partnership with CompuWare that links together the cost analyzer capabilities with CompuWare Strobe. So the cost analyzer can identify the work that's driving the peak and can be used then to link dynamically into Strobe, where Strobe can tell a customer, here's the code within the application that's consuming most of the resources. And then Cost Analyzer can show what the cost savings would be if that code were tuned. So then IT's in a position to have a conversation with the business owner or with the development group to say, we know this will take some effort and some resources, but if we could save $50,000 a month, would that be worth it? So the barrier to tuning applications, which has been, how do we get started and know that it's worth it? We might finally have found a way, a very effective way, to get over that barrier and identify tuning opportunities that could really save money.
Great point, Jay. Thank you. Well, that covers it for Jay and me, but not for you. We want to see you save, and so take that first step or take that next step in some cases, right? We have a lot of great resources for you, so I've listed some of them here. If you can't find something that you're looking for, be sure to reach out to one of us. Feel free to email either one of us. It's just our first name _ last name at bmc.com. And also be sure to follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter, because we put a lot of really good information out there. We all believe in the mainframe. We all want the mainframe to thrive. We're all depending on the mainframe. And so we are really creating a lot of great content that we think you can benefit from. So take a look at that. There's lots of blogs, lots of white papers out there. And thank you so much for joining us today. So I guess we can take some questions now.
Okay, Tom. You gave some great examples in your presentation of some big cost savings, but we did get a question. What are some of the biggest savings you've seen from doing these activities?
Yeah, I mean, obviously your mileage, will vary, right? But we have, and we don't like to, advertise really aggressive numbers because of that. But we do hear numbers like 40, 50, 60% in some cases, where they have, customers have done a POC on some of these solutions and put them into production, and they're saving some really big numbers. So great question. Thanks for asking it. Obviously, mileage will vary, but you know, 11 to 20% is really a good number, I think, for most people to shoot for, but we do see much higher.
Great. How does country multiplex pricing impact BMC's Sub-Zero product?
Jay, do you want to address that one?
Yeah, I think multiplex pricing, it will be essentially the same as any of the other pricing models. It operates differently. It consolidates MSUs in a different way so that the cost could be a little bit different. So the savings, since we haven't seen country multiplex in operation yet, the savings would be different, but the ability of Sub-Zero to save doesn't change, because if we're removing the need to have an instance licensed on an LPAR, those charges are going to change. Now, the rate at which they're being paid for on that LPAR will be different under country multiplex, perhaps, than they would be under ZNALC or AWLC or Sysplex, whichever pricing model they're currently using. So the impact is really that under country multiplex, a customer might be paying less on a per MSU basis, but the opportunity for savings is still similar.
Okay, that makes sense.
I'll just add to that. You know, from speaking with industry experts like SCS Consulting, you know, customers who are looking at multiplex pricing, they should really focus on, you know, getting that MLC base down very, very low as far as you can, you know, before entering into any multiplex, right? Because that will be kind of your base going forward.
Okay, great. Is this suite of tools capable of optimizing prices when CMP is used?
Jay, I'll give you that one.
So Janine, repeat the question again. I think it's another multiplex pricing question.
Oh, I bet you it is. CMP.
CMP
yep.
is I think, country multiplex pricing.
Yeah, you just answered it. So we'll go on to the next one. When you work with customers, do they need help with installation and configuration?
You know, some do, some don't. Generally, you know, our solutions are very easy to install and configure. But in the instance where customers want help, we have a couple of programs and partners in place to help get up and running very quickly. And Jay, I'll let you add anything you want to that if need be.
Yeah, we found there have been two steps that customers have asked for help. One is simply installation configuration. And so we created a program called Amigo that a customer opens a ticket with our support team, and we provide the documentation and the help for doing a very structured and staged installation configuration effort. So that's the first thing, and that's fairly easy. That's available to any of our customers with these products. And then some customers say, we either don't have the time or we don't have the staff and skills. We'd like to get started saving money today. And so we have a couple of programs, Jumpstart and Jumpstart Plus, that we've created in partnership with CPT Global. CPT Global is a global consulting company with extensive expertise in capacity and MLC planning and consulting. And so these are very structured programs around the cost analyzer, the intelligent capping, or the subsystem optimizer to help customers implement and begin to get savings from those products.
Great. How are these solutions offered? Are they available separately or only as a bundle?
They are offered separately. You can purchase them either separately or as a bundle. It's very flexible. Many of our customers have been buying them together because obviously Cost Analyzer provides that visual insight to the results.
Okay. And Tom, if we have an attendee who writes, this looks great, can we talk offline about my company's specific situation? What would be the best way for someone to reach you?
Oh, yeah, great, terrific. Like I said, reach out through email, tom_vogel@bmc.com, or, contact me through LinkedIn. That's great. You can call BMC directly. Thank you. That's great.
Okay. Does Subsystem Optimizer use IBM-approved facilities?
Yes, it uses IBM-approved APIs. Just so you know, you can do this. Customers have been able to do this, what we've done with Subsystem Optimizer for many years. Of course, it's quite an effort to create something, so elaborate, and there's maintenance, issues and stuff like that. So, but yeah, it's nothing different from what's available out there.
Okay, I'm going to try to take one more here, and you'll have to really try to follow me with these letters. Have you installed SCRT, probably version 23, R10, and analyzed the new CMP? And then it says SCRT. So again, it's kind of going back to that multiplex. Jay?
That's another country multiplex pricing question. Our R&D teams, I'm sure, have done that. I have not looked at the reports yet. I can tell you that this weekend we just completed an upgrade to our Z13. So they've been in the middle of doing. You all know what's involved when you do a data center upgrade and conversion, and everything went very smoothly, very quickly over the weekend. So yes, R&D is looking at those reports. I have not individually looked at them yet.
Okay, great. And I just encourage this, since there were some specific questions on that, encourage you to reach out to either Jay or Tom for more information about that. That's all the time we have for today. I want to thank everyone for attending today's webinar, and I especially want to thank you, Jay and Tom, for sharing your expertise with us. We will be sending out a link to a recording of today's webinar to everyone who's on the call, as well as to anyone who registered but for whatever reason could not attend. That concludes our webinar. Thanks again, and have a great day.